Hey there, comic book fans. I'm back once again with some more Moon Knight. And the covers, this is in the back of Moon Knight, issue number 25. We have a little Bill Sienkiewicz, Denny O'Neil. Denny O'Neil was the editor. Bill Sienkiewicz was the artist on these covers, and he's explaining why they were rejected. 3 covers. And I find it interesting why they were rejected, and I especially find it interesting in light of me, doing production work at Marvel years later, and how these covers probably wouldn't have been rejected then. This is the first one, and I mean that's a really nice cover right there. I like that. That's the Bill Sienkiewicz one that was rejected, and it was rejected because it was too tall. These cards would have been obscured by the logo, so Denny O'Neil, the editor, thought that it wasn't a good cover design and it wouldn't work. So they say that Frank Miller happened to be in the office that day, so they had him do this cover. So, they needed the cover that day. They had another artist do it, and I like this first cover better, I have to say. But this is the one that ended up this kind of, I'd call it a mediocre Frank Miller cover, but oh well. So that one was rejected because this was too tall. And here's the second one. And you can see how whimsical stuff is in comics sometimes. It's just based on someone's idea of what they want or didn't want. Once again, this is the Bill Sienkiewicz original cover. Look at that nice, let me zoom in. Get some focus going there, people. This camera's not liking. Okay, we'll have to zoom back out then. Let's see if lifting it up. But it's got some nice. It doesn't want to quite focus on it as it will, but it's got some nice Bill Sienkiewicz drawing in there. But once again, Denny O'Neil decided he wanted a close-up. Once again, Frank Miller, I think he said, was in the office that day. So they just went with that cover instead, which is okay. That one's not bad, but I guess this, but at least this is how much they used to think about the covers, which I think less thought goes into them these days, but there we go. But he just wanted it. The other cover was rejected because he wanted a close-up. It's like, oh, okay. That's an odd reason to reject a cover, but I guess that's what the editor wants. That's what the editor wants. And the third one we can look at here, also rejected. I like this one. Some Daredevil, Moon Knight. But you can see the logo is right over the Jester's face. Now it doesn't like my hand in there. So let's pull that out and let it refocus. You know what I think? I'm shooting this unusually at night, and without the natural light in here, it doesn't want to focus as well. But anyway, you can see that the Jester's face is beneath the logo. So once again, there wasn't enough room. We switch over to this one, which did I say that was by? Ron Frenz. Oh, I can't remember. I read in there who this new one was by, but I can't remember now. But let me keep it still. I swear if you move this thing even a little bit, it unfocuses. Okay, but you can see the Jester's face is big in the background now, so they got everything in they wanted. So 2 were rejected for being too tall, and 1 was rejected because it wasn't a close-up. And I find that interesting. Only because that never would have happened when I was at Marvel. To have someone redraw a cover because it didn't fit just never happened. We were always told, make it fit. So that's one of the things I find interesting. And this, I'll give you an example only because I have it. Now this, I actually wrote a blog post about this a couple of years ago because I was so surprised to find it. This is classic. I only have a printout I printed out either. I found this original art, a low-res scan of it on the internet one day. And I was surprised to see, if you look way down here, it says 1 at 90% Jared. That's me, that's my handwriting. I worked on this cover. Didn't remember it, of course, because I worked on a lot. But being that it was a surprise to even find any evidence that I did something, only because part of the job of production is to be invisible. You know, you're not supposed to see the work of the production guy. You're not supposed to know it exists for the most part. Those are the people who prepare things for print. And I was surprised to see this on the original art, because this isn't even written on the original art. I know you probably can't tell from the printout, but that's on a piece of tape. We didn't even write on the original art. I needed a stat of this, so I got out a piece of white paper tape, wrote on it, and taped it on the front of the original art and sent it to the stat room, Robbie in the stat room, to make me a stat. And then usually when it came back, I tore the tape off and threw it away. That was just our habit. Nobody wrote on the original art. And you always tore your tape off because, you know, it was tape that was designed to be able to be removed, and it wasn't going to hurt the original art. So it was a surprise to me to find this on the internet one day with my name on it. But the reason I had to do that was because this was a cover that was too tall. Same problem as with the Bill Sienkiewicz covers, but like I said, no one would even think to have this cover redrawn because it was too tall in those days. It just didn't happen. You were told, as a production guy, you were told to make it work. And this is a Joe Madureira, Dan Panosian cover. And sometimes they would just do that. You can see Storm's hand with the lightning is way up top. So if I were to put the logo over it, most of the logo would be obliterated by Storm's hand and this guy's head, and they didn't want that. You have to be able to, I mean, in these days you could obliterate the logo a lot more than you could in the early 80s, but they still wanted to be able to read it. So what I had to do was we took this original art, put my 1 at 90% on it, and put it into the stat room where Robbie and Whitey worked. That was with the two guys' names. And they would have to take a photostat of this. A photostat is basically a fancy photocopy, except it's done on photographic paper, and it's good enough for reproduction. A photocopy might not be good enough for reproduction. A photostat is. It makes an exact copy of the original art that you can print from. And I needed it 90%. So then, as you can see here, this actual image is 90% of this image, so it's smaller. And it was easy enough. There was also the Romita Raiders, where they were a whole group of guys. They rotated every 6 months or so, who came in to sort of learn under John Romita how to make comics, how to draw and stuff, and they did art corrections. So I don't even know if I did it in this case because the art correction is so minor that I may have done it myself. But normally, if there was an art correction to be done that was in any way, because they had all the tools to do it, I would get my photostat, 1 at 90%. I would bring it over to the either John or one of the Raiders directly and say, "Hey, can you art correct this for me? You know, give me some more of that sleeve over there. Give me some more lightning over there." Like I said, I think I may have actually done the art corrections on this myself because it was so simple, but normally that was the Raiders' job, so I didn't do it. I mean, and like I said, this is just what we had to do. Like I said, I found it interesting that they rejected those two beautiful Bill Sienkiewicz covers because they weren't tall enough. And like I said, this is an easy fix on this one. We had to fix much more elaborate stuff than this. Like, let me pull out this Like, let's just take a look at this one right here. If this was the early 90s, we would have taken a stat of this card right here and dragged that card down a little bit more into this body. Like I said, it wouldn't have been done on the original art, it would have all been done on stats, and shifted that down a little and fit the logo up there. I'm sure that's what we would have done rather than have but it's funny, in those days they just have a whole new cover drawn. And I'm not sure how we'd fix this one. We would probably have to shift most of it down and then have the Raiders draw a little more up here. There was like lots more to be done, but I guess, I mean, the staff was bigger in the 90s than it was in the early 80s, so there was people to actually do this. It would never happen like in the early 90s that you'd have the cover redone. So I find that interesting that in the early 80s they just had the whole cover redone in that day because Frank Miller was hanging around the office anyway. But in the 90s, that wouldn't happen. Then it was up to us production guys and the Raiders to make it work. That's what we were always told: make it work. Sometimes the editors would just stare at you and just go, make it work. They didn't want to know how the sausage was made. They didn't care. They had other things to worry about. The details of getting this cover, the logo to fit on this cover, wasn't interesting to them. They just wanted to make it work. So that's what we did. We made it work. So there you go. There's a little example. Like I said, I was shocked to see my name there because there's almost never any evidence of what we did in production. So it was kind of, this Moon Knight issue with those covers took me back to those days and give you a little look at the difference between the 80s and the 90s. So you guys have a good week out there.